Welcome to this video on what's new in the Stonefield Query SDK version 4.0. One of the first things you'll notice is that a new tool, Stonefield Query Studio, replaces the former Stonefield Query configuration utility. Stonefield Query Studio has a more modern interface and has lots of other new features as well that we'll explore as we go through them. You'll notice that it's organized with these panels at the left, similar to Outlook. In the first panel, the Start Page panel, there are a number of task pane here. One of them is for recent projects. This shows you a list in reverse order of the projects that you had opened lately. Also, you'll notice that the projects actually display as the customized application name rather than the path. So it's a little bit easier to see which projects are which. If you have several projects that have the same name, like here I have two Stonefield Query for Sage Backpack ERP, they actually just differ by location. So if I hover my mouse over this, it'll actually show me in a tooltip the various paths. Another task pane here is common tasks. For example, new project, open project, or options, which we'll come back to. There's also a Getting Started pane that has some links for common things for if you're new to the Stonefield Query. For example, a link that takes you to the videos page on our website, help, what's new, technical support, our blog, and there's also one here for opening a sample project that comes with Stonefield Query, which allows you to explore some of the Stonefield Query features without having to create your own project. One of the new features is options. If I click on the options link in the start page, that takes me to an options page where I can set up Stonefield Query Studio the way I'd like it to work. For example, in earlier versions of Stonefield Query, whenever you opened the configuration utility, it always automatically opened the last project that you had open when you closed it. Now that's optional. You can turn off load last project at startup, and then Stonefield Query Studio just comes up without automatically loading a project. You can also indicate whether captions should appear after object names. We'll see that in a moment. You can indicate whether you want non-reportable objects to be displayed or not. If you have a very large data dictionary and a lot of the items there are non-reportable, you might want to turn this option off to cut down on the number of things you have to see. And there's various other options here as well. Let's start by loading a project. So I'm going to click on this link right here. That goes and loads the project. And one of the first things you'll notice about that is it restores previously selected and expanded items, which is something new. So obviously earlier when I was working with this project, I had the categories table expanded and I had selected the category name field. And I also had the customers table expanded, the employees table, and so on. So it restores your exact settings the last time you were using Stonefield Query. That's a nice new feature. We also have some things that makes using Stonefield Query a little bit easier as well. If I scroll down and find relationships, you'll notice that there are now hyperlinks that take you between the relationship and the various tables and fields that make up that relationship. For example, I can just jump directly to the orders table by clicking this many child table link. That takes me right to the orders table. If I want to go back to what I was looking at before, I simply click this back button here in the status bar, and that takes me back to the previous record. So this makes navigation around Stonefield Query easier than it was before. You simply can click some of the hyperlinks and click the back button to go back to where you were. We also have hyperlinks in, if we go and take a look at this category ID field, you'll notice that it's defined as display field from related table. So I have hyperlinks here as well. I can jump directly to the categories table or right to the category name field just by clicking those links. One of the new panels in the Stonefield Query Studio is application views. We'll come back and talk about that a little bit later because it's an exciting new feature in Stonefield Query. Some of these other panels are similar to features that existed in earlier versions of Stonefield Query's configuration utility. We have data groups or modules, user groups, configuration, and scripts. Scripts, however, has been organized a little bit better. They're now organized by user scripts, data object scripts, and event scripts. So this organization makes it a little bit easier to find scripts that you might be looking for. Also, we've added a new filter function that makes it even easier. If I click on the filter button in the toolbar, that brings up a dialog where I can enter some text that I'm looking for. For example, if I put in the word login and choose OK, it will display only those scripts that have the word login somewhere in the script itself. That filter feature also works at the data dictionary level. If I go to my databases tab or panel and click on filter. I have the option of filtering only those items that were updated on or after a certain date. This is a feature that we had in an earlier version. But we've also added the ability to look for objects that have some text in their name or caption or other property. So for example, if I look for the word product and choose OK, it will show only those items that have the word product somewhere in the name. So in my categories table, I have a relationship to the products table. Order details has a product ID. My products table, all these fields belong to the products table, and suppliers has a relationship to products as well. But I don't see any of the other tables or fields. Let's go and turn that off. Now, another thing that you may have noticed in the databases node is that by default, Stonefield Query displays the caption after the real name. Now, in a lot of cases here, the caption is similar to the name, so you may not see much of a difference. But here we might have things like product ID. The product ID with no space in it is the real name. Product ID with a space within it is the caption. You can turn that off in the Options tab, but I think you'll find this is a handy feature, especially if you're not that familiar with the structure of the database. Let's take a look at how you work with the panels in the Stonefield Query Studio. As you saw, I click on a particular panel bar, and that displays that panel in the upper left-hand corner here. So we have the start page, we have databases, and so on. Within this panel, there would be items specific for that panel. In the case of databases, we'll see our databases, tables, fields, and so on. In the case of data groups, we'll see the data groups I've set up. If you want to work with some of these panels, for example, I can make this have fewer bars simply by dragging this down. You'll notice that when I do that, I have a much bigger area here, but I can still get at those various panels. They're now shown as individual icons at the bottom here. So I can go, for example, to user groups simply by clicking its appropriate bar. If I go and drag this back up again, then those various bars appear again. I can also click on this button in the lower right-hand corner of the panel control to bring up a menu. So I can either choose Show Less like this, or I can do it by dragging the mouse as well. I can also jump to a particular pane simply by clicking it from the menu here. We also have the ability to show different colors for themes. For example, this is using the Office 2003 blue theme. Here's the Office 2003 olive theme. So you have some control over how the color schemes appear in Stonefield Query Studio. There is a splitter bar right in here between the panel control and the properties pane at the right here. So I can simply drag my control left or right depending on how wide I want to make this. Let's take a look at some of the new features in Stonefield Query Studio that make your life a little bit easier. Let's expand customers and take a look at the relationships for customers. There's one relationship to orders. There's a test button here that allows you to test whether this relationship works or not. That's not a new feature, that's been around for a while. However, what is new is that when you click on the test button, if the relationship fails, that is, it can't find any matches between the two tables, then in that case it'll give you some information about what went wrong. For example, let's purposely change this to something that doesn't work, and let's test it. And you can see that there were no matches found. Now, as the message indicates, it doesn't necessarily mean that the relationship is wrong, although in this case it is. It simply means that maybe there were no records between orders and customers that have matches on whatever your field is. In other cases, the message might be that it can't find any matches because there are no records. For example, if I didn't have any orders records at all, then again, the relationship might not work because it can't find any matches between customers and orders. But in that case, it'll say there are no records in the orders table. Let's go and fix this relationship back to the way it should be. There's also another new function in the File menu, Test All Relations. Rather than testing one relationship at a time, click on the test button, click on the next relation, click on the test button, click on the next relation, and so on. You can click on Test All Relations to go through all of the relations in your data dictionary and test them all at once. If they work, it displays a message saying that they all worked. If it fails, it displays a dialog where you can indicate, where it shows what went wrong. Let's go back and change this again to a bad relation. And on purpose, let's go and click on another node so we're not selecting that node. Let's go up to the File menu and choose Test All Relations. It goes through the data dictionary and tests all the relationships. However, you have an option to test only those relationships that have a certain version number if you're using versioning. In my case, I want to test all relations, so I'm just going to click on OK. And it found that there was a problem between my orders and customers relation. We notice that the message is the same as it was here in the single dialog. But there's also a link here. If I click on this particular link, that takes me to that particular record where I can see what the relationship is and then have an opportunity to fix it. So with that dialog, I can very quickly click between my various relationships that have problems, fix them, and then go on to the next one that has a problem. Another new feature is the ability to work with the data dictionary files directly rather than through the Stonefield Query Studio interface. Obviously, we recommend using the interface when possible. However, there may be times when you need to do, for example, mass updates to the data dictionary, changing all fields that have a certain caption to use a different caption, or changing all integer fields to something. Under the File menu is a new Query Data Dictionary function. This brings up the Stonefield Query Data Dictionary Query utility. This is direct access now to the Stonefield Query Data Dictionary. In this grid are all of the records that make up the Stonefield Query Data Dictionary. And there's various record types here. F are for fields, C are for tables, and so on. If you take a look at the Stonefield Query Studio help file, that will give you information about how this data dictionary is organized. It has a SQL statement here that you can execute. For example, if I only want to see all fields, I can choose fields. Although you don't see it, this basically is added a where rect type equals F. Same thing with tables and relations. However, I can enter my own SQL statement. For example, let's say that we're looking for all fields that have the word city somewhere in the caption. So we can say where caption like city %. So I would have to start with the word city. When I execute the SQL statement, it now shows only those records that match my criteria. This box down here is used to display the contents of certain kinds of memo fields. For example, my field expression field, it would show it down here. Now this is actually a live grid. If I make changes in here, it'll actually save those changes directly to the data dictionary. So I can do them one at a time here. I can also enter SQL statements here that will do mass updates. I can use the SQL delete command or the SQL update command, for example. If I had to say something like update rep meta set caption equals something where caption is like something else, that would do a mass update of all of the captions for all of my fields, for example. So you can use this utility if you want to do mass updates or queries directly against your data dictionary. Now obviously this is kind of a powerful tool, so we recommend that you use this definitely with caution, because some of the changes you might make to your data dictionary might make it unusable. Creating new projects in the Stonefield Query Studio is a little bit easier than it was before. If we go up and click on the New button, rather than asking me to pick a folder and have it create some files in that folder, I now get a new project wizard where I can put in a project name. This would be the application name property, what we'd see in the configuration node. We can also enter in a short name, so I might, for example, have this called Northwind Reporting Solution, but I want the short name to be just Northwind, for example. I can then pick a location. I can indicate some of the common options that I might want in the configuration tab. For example, should multiple data sources be allowed? Can the user edit the SQL statement? And so on. Let's pick a folder somewhere. There's also a next step here, and this would be the equivalent of what you'd see in the Add Database dialog. So you choose your ODBC or OLADB or Visual Fox Pro data source using a connection string or DSN. You enter your various properties and so on. So in the Stonefield Query Studio, rather than being a two-step process, creating a project, then adding your data dictionary to it, it's now a one-step process. You specify where you want the project created and what it should be called and what the connection information is, and then it goes and creates those project files and automatically updates the data dictionary from your connection information as well. One of the exciting new features in Stonefield Query version 4.0 is the concept of application views. Like most reporting solutions, Stonefield Query is database-centric. It shows a list of the tables and fields as they appear in the database. Now, one of the benefits of Stonefield Query is that we can display captions, nice descriptive names for tables and fields, rather than those real underlined table and field names. You can also customize the data dictionary so that it looks more like what the user is expecting. But ultimately, it still comes down to the fact that data dictionaries are organized like the databases are. Let me show you an example of what I mean by this. If we take a look, if we launch Stonefield Query and take a look at a new report, in step 2, you'll notice that we see nice descriptive names for tables and fields, but ultimately it's still organized by tables and fields, as opposed to the data entry screens that the user normally sees in their application. Now, in the case of a small database where there's only 5 or 6 tables, it's not that big of a deal. But what about a typical accounting application that has hundreds of tables and thousands of fields? That can make it a lot more awkward for the user to pick the thing they're looking for. Let's take a look at, for example, at Stonefield Query for Sage ACPAC ERP. Here I've loaded the Stonefield Query for Sage ACPAC ERP project. If we click on the database node, you can see that there are over 1,300 tables and 45,000 fields. So even though we have them grouped by module, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and so on, there are still hundreds of tables in each module and hundreds of fields in each table that the user has to choose from. This can be kind of overwhelming for the average user to have to pick from this large group. So we've added this concept called application views. This allows you to set up these views of the data the same way that the user sees them in their data entry screen. For example, let's take a look at the ACPAC AR customer screen to show you what I mean by this. Here's part of the Sage ACPAC ERP AR customer screen. You notice that we have at the top of this dialog here customer number and customer name, and then we have individual tabs here for various categories. There's one for address, one for contact information, processing, and so on. And not all of the fields that are displayed in each of these tabs come from the customer's table. For example, this is the national account number, but this is a lookup value, the description of that national account number taken from a different table. Same thing here. Here's a group code. Here's the description of that code taken from a different table. So when the user looks at this data entry screen, they see certain things that they expect to see. However, in Stonefield Query for Sage ACPAC, they wouldn't see those same things. They would see customer number, customer name, national account number, and group code, and so on, not organized in the same way that they are here. It'd either be shown alphabetically or in order by database order. And they also wouldn't necessarily see some of these lookup values. So let's take a look at how application views can solve this problem for us. On the Application Views panel in Stonefield Query Studio, you can see that we've set up quite a few different application views here. These are all what you might consider to be top-level views. These match the top-level items or modules that the user would see in Sage ACPAC ERP. If we take a look at under AR customers, we see customer groups, national accounts, customers, ship to locations, and customer activity, just as the user would see in the accounts receivable module in Sage ACPAC ERP. If we drill down and take a look at customers, then here we can see that for this customer's view, there is a customer number and customer name that will appear directly in this view, just as in the AR data entry screen, there are customer number and name fields at the top. Then underneath that, we have additional views. Each of these views maps to a tab that appeared in the AR Customers Data Entry screen. For example, there's our Address tab here. And you can see there's National Account Number, National Account Description, which is coming from a different table. Group Code, Group Description, again, coming from a different table, and so on. So if we were to compare the fields that appear in this Address view, they're exactly the same as the ones that appear in the AR Customers Data Entry screen, the Address tab. They even have the same captions for all the fields. These captions may not necessarily be the same captions that appear in every view. For example, in one data entry screen, it might be customer NO period. In another one, it might be customer number spelled out. So on a view-by-view basis, you can control what the caption is and what the default column heading is when you use a report. So application views allow you to create a application-centric view of your database. So that way the users don't have to understand how the database is structured. Let's take a look at Stonefield Query for Sage ACPAC ERP and see what the user would see when they run the program. Here's Stonefield Query for Sage ACPAC ERP. Let's go and create a new quick report. I'll just give it some name. And let's choose the Accounts Receivable module. In step 2, you'll notice that this looks now somewhat different than it does in earlier versions of Stonefield Query. Rather than showing a list of tables, we now see a list of application views. So under Accounts Receivable Customers, we see a Customers item. This exactly matches the Customers Data Entry screen in Sage ACPAC ERP. When I choose it, we can see customer number and customer name at the top, just like we would see in the data entry screen. And then we have individual tabs. These are actually subviews for matching each of the tabs in the data entry screen. So if I expand address, we see national account number, national account description, group code, group description, the exact same captions, the exact same order that they appear in the AR customer's data entry screen. This means that if the user is familiar with the data entry screen in ACPAC, which they likely are because they use it day in and day out, they can find the fields they're interested in Stonefield Query, rather than having to choose one of several hundred tables in the accounts receivable module and one of several hundred fields in the customers table. They simply choose the view that they want, and then they choose the individual fields they want, which appear in the exact same order and with the same heading as they appear in the data entry screen. This makes it much easier for the user to be able to find the things that they want to report on without having to know the database order and so on. However, if you are familiar with the data structures, you can still switch back and show the database view just simply by clicking this item here. Now we get the traditional view that we've seen in earlier versions of Stonefield Query. Here's a list of all of our tables, here's a list of the fields in each table, and so on. So with this new application view feature, we think that you can create a version of Stonefield Query for your application's database that is much easier for your users to use, and they'll be a lot happier as a result. That's it for this video. There are lots of other new features in Stonefield Query Studio, so take the time to go through the help file and take a look at the What's New topic so you can see all of the new features and explore some of the things that will make your life a little bit easier. Thanks for watching this video and have a great day.